Welcome, everyone.
Welcome, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon to all. Thank you so much for coming. Um, my colleague Syre and I are so excited to be with you to talk with you about the Memoru Center for Visionary Healing Arts Psychedelic Facilitator Training Program. That sounded very long saying it. So Syre and I have some slides to share with you, and we'll present a little bit about the program. And then we really intentionally wanted to leave about half the time together for Q&A. And often some of the best things come up in questions. And so probably in what we present, we'll have be able to answer a lot of your questions, and then we will have time to do that. And I should also introduce myself. I'm Sarah Lewis. I use she, her pronouns. I'm one of the co-founders of Memoru, which is our 501(c)(3) nonprofit, and also Memoru Center for Visionary Healing Arts, which is where our psilocybin training program and our healing center in Boulder is located. Syre, would you like to jump in and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Sarah. My name is Syre Saniyah, and I use he, him pronouns. And I am the program director for the Psychedelic Facilitator Training program at Memorial. So, really happy to be here.
Okay, great. Um, Jacob, before I jump in, did we have any sort of like announcements or anything, or should I go right into our presentation?
The only announcement that I can think of is that if questions arise during the presentation, as Sarah mentioned, we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. There'll be an opportunity to ask questions live, like you can come on camera and speak your question, but if you prefer to enter your question in the chat, you can also do that as well. We'll be giving equal weight to questions that are put in the chat, as well as folks that want to come on camera and ask a question live as well.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, and Jacob is our operations manager here at Memoru.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah, no, and that's great to know about the Q&A box because sometimes as you're sort of going along and hearing something, you want to get your question in at that moment. So, like Jacob's saying, we'll answer it at the end, but people are welcome to sort of put their questions in as they go. It is also nice if people want to come on screen, and so, you can think about the best way that you want to ask your question. So let me go ahead and share screen here. Okay. Um, so just a little bit about, and are you seeing this okay? If someone could just give a little nod. Okay, great. Thank you. So just a little bit about Memoru, and I'm seeing some familiar faces, and so I see some local Boulder folks and some people that we've been in community with, but I'm also assuming that for some people, Memoru might be new for you, and people might be checking out different programs, which I think would be a good thing to do. There are a lot of really good facilitator training programs out there. We'll talk about what's required for licensure. And so, any licensed training program, it is very prescriptive in what needs to be taught. There's a lot of items in the 150-hour training that needs to be taught. And so, any of the licensed training programs will teach that. But then, of course, they all have their own different philosophies and sort of approaches. And so I think it is a good thing that you check out a few different programs. So happy just to tell you a little bit about Memoru. We'll introduce our education team. Then I'll turn things over to Syre, who, as the director of the program, will go a little bit more in depth with this particular training. And then, as we said, we will leave plenty of time for Q&A. So some of you might know that the history of Memoru has come about in sort of like a few different iterations. So part of Memoru's kind of origin story is that we began at Naropa University in the Center for Psychedelic Studies, and there we had a training program for 3 years. We were one of the first Colorado approved training programs. And we're really involved in, sort of working with the state to shape that training. When psilocybin became legal in Colorado, on the one hand, that was really great for our training. On the other hand, it presented some challenges to do the work that we wanted to do, particularly in terms of offering experiential training, where our trainees are, actually facilitating with psilocybin. So it's not just a theoretical thing. And that was really challenging to do under the auspices of the university because psilocybin, as many of you probably know, it's state legal in Colorado, but it's still federally illegal. And so that presented some challenges for the university. Our group had already been talking about starting a clinic in Boulder. And so we had already been discussing, sort of forming a new entity and joining together with my now co-founders, Marcela Otalora and Bruce Poulter, who have been very involved in MAPS and MDMA assisted therapy clinical trials. Both of our groups wanted to start a clinic and do training. And so, with all of that coming together, we had a separation out of Naropa. But I think, some people, it is important to know that it's still a very comparable training, and the state was able to, sort of transfer our license into Memoru. So we're still very connected to the university. I still have my faculty sort of rank and title there, and still, very connected to the university. Some of the co-founders and teachers went to Naropa, and we still really have a connection and sort of a root in contemplative training. And so, as you'll see when we talk a little bit about the curriculum, and if you go on to do the application, we actually have a requirement that people are engaging in their own contemplative practice in some way, which we see as really essential to self-care and to staying grounded in doing this work. So that's, remains a really important part of our program, and I'd say is a distinction of Memoru compared to some of the other programs that we really have this deep emphasis on contemplative practice and somatic practice. And that's really a core way that we teach and train our facilitators. We also have a very explicit anti-oppression framework that we use. And an important part of the training, is to actually understand the ways that psilocybin as a sacred plant medicine, how has that been used in indigenous cultures around the world? What are the ways that it's important to really center and honor, the indigenous roots of this medicine? How do we engage in reciprocity with the living stewards, the cultural stewards of these medicines today? And so that we're not just looking at, psilocybin as a purely medicalized treatment, right? That can just be sort of extracted. And so that's a deep part of our training. And so, again, as you're sort of looking at the different training programs, I'd say that Memoru really has quite a lot on really sort of deepening into that kind of understanding. We also have a very explicit trauma-informed approach. We are a training program that welcomes both clinicians and wellness facilitators who are not necessarily clinicians. And I would say some of our, most deeply skilled facilitators that we see, some of them don't have a clinical background and are people who are midwives, doulas, spiritual care providers, coaches. And so we don't have a hierarchy where we, put clinicians above other kinds of practitioners. But I will say that our training is very trauma informed, and, that's an important sort of distinction, I would say, as well in our program. So just a little bit more about Memoru and what we do. So we have a healing center in Boulder, Colorado, and we do a lot of training as well. And so we're working with a lot of clients. Some are coming from out of state, even internationally. We've had people traveling. We also work a lot with our local community. And then, like I said, we do a lot of training. And so this is something that I can talk about, a little bit towards the end, that we're coming up with more and more opportunities for our graduates, people like all of you who once you finish, there's people who really want to deepen into more experiential training opportunities, which has also been a really great way for us to provide more affordable care for people who, there might be no way that they can really afford a full fee service. And so we found some really innovative and creative ways for people, like all of you, when you finish, if you're wanting to come to Boulder to work with clients under mentorship, under more supervision. And I'd say that's probably one of our favorite things that we're doing right now at Memoru. We also, in addition to psilocybin care, we offer ketamine assisted therapy and regular psychotherapy. And then we have a few research projects that we are actively engaged in. So I think now, Syre, I'd love to turn the floor over to you to tell us more about the training.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, Memoru was doing such amazing things, and it's just so cool to hear about all of them at the same time. It's like I know what's happening, and then just to hear it all, it's like, this is so beautiful. Um, yeah, so the Psychedelic Facilitator Training Program is, as Sarah was saying, it's really grounded in a trauma informed perspective. It really is moving in a way that honors the lineages that these medicines are originating from, and emphasizing sovereignty of both the practitioners and the people that we're holding space for, and for the medicines themselves, like really thinking about the medicine as having, its own spirit, and so really moving in ways that honor, yeah, the sovereignty of all of these different aspects of this work. And the program itself, we can go to the next slide. um, yeah, is held really beautifully by this amazing team. So we have the co-founders of Memoru, as Sarah mentioned, Bruce and Marcela and Sara, and then this amazing team of lead educators, including myself, Charlotte James, Flory St. Amy, and Wilhelmina de Castro. And all of the folks on the educational team really share these values of moving in ways with this medicine that is really centering accessibility, that is centering, ways this medicine can be used to support, liberation for folks, and really thinking about how can we be in right relationship with this medicine in a way that is not just thinking about it as this medical approach to healing, but really reconnecting with ancient ways of knowing and decolonizing our approach to this work. And so it's, all of us in our own individual paths really value this approach, and coming together to support the program in this way, it's going to be really, really magical. Move to the next slide. Okay, so here's the overview. The training itself spans 150 hours over the course of 8 months. And so we have different modules that we will be exploring in our time together. And there's a combination of ways to interact with the material. And so each of the lead educators will also have a pod group. So it's a group of students, about 10 or so students, that will have a connection with their lead educator, and they meet with them every other week to process what's coming up for them, to deeper dive into the material, to receive mentoring and connection, and really build a strong cohort with a small group of students. And then we'll also have live classes that meet on the alternating weeks. So when we're not in our pod groups, we'll have live classes on the alternate Thursdays, where the lead educators will be teaching live, will be teaching the material. And then in addition to that, there is self-guided work that is asynchronous, that all the students in the program will have the opportunity to deep dive on their own, right? So that's a combination of journaling, different readings, or there may be videos that support the materials that we're learning, and then also really centering self-care activities. And so this is about 6 hours per month. So between all of these different methods, that equals our 150 hours. We will also have, throughout the course of the program, 3 weekend intensives. And so that will be on Saturdays and Sundays that give us, again, a little bit more concentrated time to be with the material together. To spend time in contemplation together and to really have opportunities to experientially process some of the information that we're learning together. Go on to the next slide. Yes, and so tuition, right? How do we move forward in terms of accessing this amazing training program? So the investment for the program is $7,995, and so once again, this includes everything that I just mentioned. So the 150-hour curriculum, live instruction, the weekend intensives, the small group mentorship. Asynchronous work, and then, as Sarah was mentioning, post graduation licensure support on the other side. And, after you apply, there's a $500 deposit, and then the rest of the tuition can be spread out over 3 payments. A lot of folks have been asking, reaching out and asking about, when how applications are accepted and are they on a rolling basis. Yes, applications are accepted on a rolling basis. We'll be making decisions as the applications come in, and at the same time, the scholarships are also offered on a rolling basis. And so it is a value of Memoru to make education around this work accessible as we can. It feels like an ethical imperative. And to support this mission, we do offer some scholarships for folks from these historically excluded communities. And so people of the global majority, LGBTQIA folks, veterans, folks with disabilities, and those experiencing financial hardship. So as a part of the application to the program, if a scholarship is something that you're interested in, you can also apply for a scholarship at that time. Okay, I'll turn it back over to you, Sarah. You're muted.
There we go. Okay. So practicum. So some of you might be really familiar with the Colorado licensure practice and others, or process, and some of you might be sort of learning about it. So it's not a requirement that people doing our training get licensed. And some people, are clear that that's exactly why they're coming. They want to get licensed, and that's, why they're doing the program. Some people, especially if you're out of state, have a question about whether they're going to get licensed. And we've had lots of students decide later. I mean, so it's not something that you need to even decide at the beginning because the training qualifies you for licensure no matter what. And so even if you have some questions about that, it would be fine to just do the program and wait and see if you're going to pursue licensure. If you are going to pursue licensure, you are required to do a practicum. So the practicum is a 40-hour experiential training where there is a requirement to facilitate. Also, as a part of the practicum, there's an opportunity to receive your own psilocybin session. Many people find that to be really beneficial. And even if you're someone who's experienced psilocybin before in different contexts, I mean, we've had a lot of people who have come and who have said, I haven't experienced it in a therapeutic way. And so even some of our folks who, have, a lot of their own experience really found that to be a really profound, personally meaningful opportunity, but also really help them deepen into their training, right? To really see what is it to actually work with a facilitator. And so practicum tends to be a really meaningful experience. And to really deepen your facilitation skills. So the practicums are done in small groups of about 10 to 12 trainees. The practicum takes place here at Memoru in Boulder, and so you'll need to travel to Boulder if you want to do the practicum. And so this is optional. So there's a separate sort of price and registration process for the practicum. And there's some different ways to do it. And so you might see a lot of practicums out there people do after their training is complete. So you do the 150 hours and then you would come back and do your practicum. And we offer, every couple months, we usually have a practicum that you'd be able to join into. DORA, which is the regulatory, sort of board for Colorado, they also allow up to 20 hours to be completed concurrently. And so what that means is we also offer the opportunity that you would do 2 weekends concurrent with the program. And then, so they only allow 20 to be done concurrently. So then that means after we end, then you would come back and complete your sorry, I said you would do two. You would do 1 weekend concurrent, and then you would come back and do another weekend after the training ends. So it's just more spread out. So, especially if you're someone who's local, that might be a good option for you. If you're someone who's out of state or you live far away in Colorado and you only want to, travel to Boulder once, you might choose to do it at the end. All roads sort of go to the same place, right? Because you can't complete anyway until you're finished. So there's no like, you don't get licensed faster if you do it this way. It's just sort of what's going to work for you, with your schedule, childcare, if that's a consideration, finances. So you have some different options of how you might do your practicum. But just knowing that if you do want to get licensed, there is a requirement. Some people also wait. So there's no, I mean, it would be fine to sort of think, I'm going to do this program and it's intense and it's a financial investment. And then I'm going to take a little bit of pause and come back and do my practicum 6 months later, even a year later. That's totally fine. There's no requirement that it's, done right away. So that is practicum. And so a little more on licensure. There's two forms of licensure in Colorado. So to become a natural medicine facilitator, it's really open to anyone over the age of 21. These are the requirements. You complete a program like Memoru. You would do basic life support certification. And then, like I was saying, you would go on to do practicum. And then there's this period of 40 hours of post-training consultation. People are mostly doing this in groups. And so folks like Syre and Bruce and Marcela offer consultation groups, which is really great because it's a group that meets usually every other week for 2 hours. And at that point, you have a training license. You can see clients, you can charge money, but then you have this consultation group where you come and bring cases, talk about the work that you're doing, any ethical things coming up, a lot of questions of like, how do I start my practice? How do I get insurance? All these kind of details, right, that people need to actually begin working as a facilitator. And so it's really great. I mean, it's a requirement for licensure, but I think, more than that, people are finding it's really supportive. Because we do 2 hour groups, it takes about, 6 months to complete. And some of our folks even want to stay in their consultation group when they're done because they're like, I don't want to lose my group. This is where I come and talk about my cases and sort of have a community. I always feel a little concerned when I see people doing psychedelic therapy or psychedelic facilitation in isolation. Like it seems like they don't have a community, they don't have elders or mentors that they work with, they don't have peers who it's a little bit of a red flag for me when I see people doing that. And so having a community of practitioners, including those who are more experienced than we may be, and then also likewise kind of sharing what we've learned with peers is something at Memoru that we think is really supportive. And so we always have a lot of consultation and mentorship kind of going on, and that tends to be something that people really enjoy doing. In Colorado, there's also the opportunity to be a clinical facilitator. What this means is that you have an existing Colorado clinical license of some kind that you pair with your facilitator license. So that's all of the requirements to be a facilitator plus having an existing DORA license. So if you're a social worker, if you're a physician, a psychologist, the state allows you to put your licenses together and it basically expands your scope of practice. What's the difference between the two? There are some restrictions that if a client comes along and they have a diagnosis of some kind, like PTSD, like major depressive disorder. If they have a medical diagnosis of some kind, you do need to be in collaboration with a practitioner who has expertise in that area. So if you're a natural medicine facilitator, it doesn't mean that you can't work with those folks, but that you do need to be in collaboration and maybe do some consultation, which I think you would also want. At Memoru, we have a nurse practitioner who's a part of our team who really specializes in, contraindications with medication. And it's really actually good to have an interdisciplinary kind of group of people that you collaborate with. But that's sort of the difference between the two pathways or the two different kinds of licenses. We have been getting some great questions from people, so I thought I would just address this briefly. If you're out of state, so you do not need to live in Colorado, anyone can get the Colorado license. If you're a licensed clinician in another state, you might think about some people are actually choosing, even if they're a licensed clinician, like I know, Syre, you did this, you're a psychologist, but when you got your Colorado license, you decided to, just go for the facilitator license. Some people are doing this because they're finding like, I'm really not going to be working necessarily clinically in that same way. I want to facilitate retreats. I want to be working in more of a wellness capacity. So just because you have a clinical license in another state, it's not like then you're required to do that here. It's just sort of a question of like how many licenses do you want to have, right? Because you're paying licensing fees and how much do you think you're, really going to be coming to Colorado to work? Um, there's also time to sort of figure it out. When you finish practicum, you have your training license, you're able to start seeing clients, charging money. You can actually, you have you're in consultation. You can actually have that training license for 2 years. And some people are feeling like I can work with clients, I can charge money. I don't really get that much more with the full license. And so you can stay having your training license for that 2 years if you're out of state, then kind of figure out what do I think I want to do in terms of license, getting that full license. We've had some great questions from people from other states. Will Memoru qualify for New Mexico? Or it looks like Minnesota is going to be pretty soon. There are many states that are seriously considering different laws of opening psilocybin programs. We're watching New Mexico in particular pretty closely. New Mexico has said, I mean, they don't have a accreditation process yet, so there isn't anything, that training programs can apply to. But New Mexico has said publicly that they're going to accept out-of-state training, like ours, for at least a year before they kind of come to their own requirements. And so if people are coming from other states, yeah, I think a lot of states will sort of accept reciprocity. And if you're also someone who you want to know, you want certainty, you can wait and kind of see, what are going to be the exact requirements for your state. But we have had a lot of out of state folks come, and, many of them are now on sort of the boards in their own state and kind of forging different processes. And so we have a great alumni network that also you would become a part of. So moving right along here, ready to apply. This is a picture of our group space in our clinic. So the application portal is open. We see that a number of folks, even some of you here, we see that you've already started your application, which is great. And like Syre was saying, it will be rolling. And so you'll hear back from us pretty soon once you apply. including about, scholarship decisions. So I think that we can now move to Q&A.
If you're interested in coming on camera, folks, if you wouldn't mind using the raise hand function in Zoom, that way then I can spotlight you for everybody and I can make sure that Sara and Syre can see you. That would be great. Or feel free to drop your question in the chat and we can answer from there as well.
I'm not seeing the raise the hand function, so I'm sorry, but may I ask a question?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I'm dual camera in here because my computer camera doesn't work. So for the letter of recommendation, I have one of my past instructors that is going to do my letter of recommendation. I know there is a spot on the application form online to submit that, but she would like to send it directly to somebody. Who would I have her email that to?
Yeah, she can email it to me. That would be okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Sure. And it's just Syre at Memoru.com, right? Com.
Are you sure? Are you sure?
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I can remember that one.
Okay. Hi, Josh.
Hi.
You're muted.
There we go. Hello, hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi. Would you be willing to explain what does it look like for someone who's from out of state planning to go, get trained, and then return to their state and perhaps, have people from their state go with them to practice out of state and then come back and support them? Is that something that's happening? What does that look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So I live in Michigan, and I am licensed in both Oregon and Colorado. And so, yeah, so what that looks like is when I'm holding a space for someone and in those states that we schedule time at a service center or a healing center to do that. I'm doing preparation work with them virtually before we meet up in person, right? So however your preparation program looks. For me, it's several sessions of preparation. Then we meet in person at the healing center, and then for the actual medicine ceremony, and then we do integration virtually on the other side. Depending on how long you're in town with them, you might do some in-person integration while you're there, and then continue integration virtually after that when you go back home. So yeah, that's the model that I use typically.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and I'll just say that I think a lot of our alumni too have taken the training and are doing different things. I mean, we do, as a natural medicine psilocybin licensed program, I'd say that there's a heavy emphasis on that, but it's also a deep training in psychedelic facilitation in general. And so some of our alumni, even while they're in the program, might be working with ketamine. They might be working in ceremonial spaces. They might be providing harm reduction in different ways. Our alumni are doing so many different things that, there's sort of the regulated program and all of the requirements and sort of like what you can do with that license. But I would say that our training is a deep training unto itself in psychedelic facilitation in general. And so even if you're in a state that you don't, perhaps it doesn't look likely, right, that your state is going to legalize psilocybin, what are the different ways that you might be, involved in other kinds of psychedelic facilitation?
I don't see the hand either. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is this the first cohort that's going through with this program?
This is our fourth cohort. If you consider that we started, or fifth actually, if you look at when we were a part of Naropa. And so this would be number 5.
Okay, perfect. Great. Matt, there was a question I had out earlier, but my question is, I was lucky enough to sit with Marcella and Bruce DNA assisted therapy through MAPS, and I hold an LPC, and so I'm wondering, through the curriculum, how are you integrating someone like me who especially practices but is now learning, right, like the new process of psychedelics? What's that? What does that look like? Like I'm curious, super excited, and like, wanting to get, I guess, any pre-practice or anything framework that I could do to get myself leveled up on the best way possible. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. You don't need to have prior experience doing this work in order to really have a powerful experience. Like you're training as an LPC, like you already have a foundation of like holding space for people and with people, and many people come, with other licenses, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people are just holding different types of space and don't have like a clinical background. And the training itself, the 150 hours, gives you a lot of foundation in doing this work. And before you're able to practice independently, you'll do a 40-hour practicum and you'll have 40 hours of consultation, so you'll continue learning throughout the course of your career, really. Even for those of us who've been doing this work, it's like I'm always learning something, and you will get a really solid foundation moving through this experience.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe let's move over to the chat, Syre. I see Fabiola's question about international students, and some people might have this question in general, like, can I count other kinds of experiences that I've had? Dora doesn't. So to Fabiola's question, if you're wanting to get licensed in Colorado, Dora will not waive any requirements, including practicum. It's not that they're doubting that people have, really deep experience, but they really want it to be the practicum in particular. And so if you're wanting to get licensed in Colorado, you would need to do the practicum. If Fabiola and others who have this question, you would just like to participate in the consultation, yes, you can absolutely join and do that for the experience and the camaraderie and the support. And if you're an international person, you may or may not be seeking licensure. I hope that answers that question. And then I can just, okay, good. Jacob, you answered Alicia's question. So maybe we can move now to Archie. Archie, would you come on and ask your question?
Hello. I was wondering if you could say more about how Indigenous and ancestral knowledge is included in the training.
Yeah, it's definitely really deeply centered in the training and woven throughout. Actually, it's not just like, oh, we're going to just like talk about it in this one little area. It's actually the foundation of the work that we do. And when we think about Indigenous wisdom, too, we're thinking about Indigenous cultures from all over the world, too, right? That, the people of the earth have been using these medicines throughout time. And so it's something that we deeply center. So, even as we speak about, how are we in sacred reciprocity with this medicine? How are we, thinking about ceremonial practices with these medicines, right? And what does that look like in ways that we are not just using a medical model, but really honoring the spirit of the medicine, and that is centered and focused on throughout the work that we do.
Yeah. I love hearing that. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for your question.
Well, then Natalie's asking, how in depth does the program cover preparation and integration?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we go into depth with that. Those are, that model of preparation administration and integration is sort of the foundational model of holding this work. And so it's something that we center a lot, and we'll learn about it in terms of holding space for individuals, but then also with groups and the different methods of holding each of those three sections. And so, again, that's something that is talked about throughout the program, and not just in like little chunks. So,
I'm typing a response to this question
okay.
about attendance that I think some other people might like to hear about as well. So I'm going to type my response to that. And then
Yeah.
Nina is asking how to determine which group facilitator someone will work with. Syre, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah. I think, once we have our, our cohort of admitted students, then we will be asking folks to list their kind of like rank order their options of who they would like to work with. And then the good thing about it is all of the meetings are on the same day and time, right? So it's less about organizing different schedules, and we will do our best to pair folks with the lead educator mentor that they requested. So yeah, I think that would probably just be the best way to do it. People kind of rank order. We'll do our best to have people matched with who they're wanting to work with. And at the same time, you're going to learn from all of us, right? So each of us are going to be teaching the live classes, we'll be at the weekend intensives, and then we each hold a smaller group that we meet with every other week. So even if that person isn't your small group mentor, you'll still get a chance to interact with us over the course of the period.
Thank you.
And then I can... Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Hi, I was just responding to the question that I asked.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you. I mainly asked that question because Charlotte James, I attended one of her trainings for decolonization work.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
Yes.
And then she told me about Memoru. So I looked into it, and then, for a long time I was trying to figure out, is like Filipino representation here at all in this space. And then I saw Wilhelmina De Castro, and I was like, okay, this is fine. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna learn from everybody regardless. I was just curious of like how you guys decided that. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Nina.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then Nina, and then if you can maybe just stay on, because then I wanted to clarify the next part of your question. So basically, once you complete your practicum, if you're going to get licensed, you get something through the state of Colorado called a training license, and that allows you to see clients and charge money. You just need, a consultant to work with. You're allowed to have that for 2 years. Some people are like, I need to get my full license right away. I don't know why, like I'm saying, you don't really get that much. It's just sort of paying for another license. So a lot of people are holding on to it for the 2 years. And so, but as soon as you complete your 40 consultation hours, you're then eligible to get your full license.
Okay,
does that make sense,
I see.
Nina, or does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, that makes sense. That last part where it's like after the 40 hours, then I'm eligible to move on to see if I want to do my the clinician one.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you have a clinical license, then at that time, so everyone's really in the same track until that point. So, and this is true, I think, for really all the training programs out there, because it's such a specific curriculum that Dora wants. And so whether you're a wellness facilitator, a clinician, the training is really all the same up until you've completed your consultation hours. And then at that point, then when you're going for full licensure, that's when you decide what kind of license you want to have.
Okay, thank you. Good to know, because I'm in Maryland, and who knows where we're at right now. All I know is we have a task force.
That's what I say to people is wait, and that you don't really need to know now, because you're going to go through this training, right? And that's going to take you through May, finish your practicum. Then you're going to be able to see clients, charge money, get your practice going. Do you
Right.
really have time until you're going to be getting that full license? And some people, like Syre and others are like, I don't need to then also get another license, my clinical license here in Colorado. If you're not planning on seeing clinical regular therapy clients or something like that here, you probably don't really need
Noted.
it. Another thing to pay for. Now, if someone's like, no, I'm going to be working in a clinic and I'm doing specific trauma work, and right, so there may be specific reasons based on what you're doing that you do want to get your endorsement for clinical license in Colorado. But a lot of people, if really what they're doing is psilocybin facilitation and retreats and healing centers, we have, like we were saying, out of town folks, our alumni can come to Memoru and rent space by the day if you have a client you want to work with. And so some people are really finding they don't need that. And they also want to wait and kind of see what their state is doing. And so your state may
Okay.
not really require you to like also have this other level of licensure. And so because it's really the same all the way through for out of state folks, it's sort of like, I think a lot more will be known in some of these different states in a year or two of what those requirements are. We will do everything we can to, if there's something we need to apply to for a state, even as the program's going along. And so, say if one of your states, they create a licensed pathway for training programs, we would, probably apply. And if we need to, maybe create some kind of bridge curriculum, so we really want to work with
Okay.
people so that, the training that they're doing can be recognized in their state. We just don't have any information now to know what that is.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Amazing. Thank you so much for answering that.
Go
Appreciate it.
Maryland. Yes.
Yes. Let's go task force.
Yeah.
And then I can answer. Rachel had a question about the teaching team and
Yeah.
how many of us are BIPOC. So, in terms of the lead education team, we are all BIPOC folks. And so the classes that are taught on the every other Thursday will be taught by us. And then our co-founders and will be teaching during the intensives too, particularly the second and third intensive. They'll be there as in addition to the lead educators. So, yeah. Let's see.
Fabulous question. Is it possible to engage in the full license process if we're not residents in the US? Yes, it is. And Jason is asking, my understanding is that currently medicine can be administered in a healing center within the state of Colorado for licensed clinical facilitators. Are there provisions to extend medicine access to private practice environments? What are current restrictions for independent facilitation? So in Colorado, anywhere that you're facilitating psilocybin needs to become a licensed healing center. And so there's now many private practice offices in Colorado where those, therapists have registered or licensed their private practice office as a healing center. And so that might be something that some of you go on to do. And then some of our alumni who have a private practice have found they feel like maybe I'm not even going to do, even doing one of these sessions once a week is a lot. It's all day, right? There's all the prep, there's all the integration. It's very intensive work. And so many people feel I'm probably not going to do more than one a week. Maybe I only want to do 2 or 3 a month, which would still be a substantial amount. And so some people in private practices like that are finding, I mentioned like Memoru, for instance, will rent rooms by the day to facilitators. And so some folks are finding that that is a model that works better for them. It is very expensive to open a healing center. There's a lot of licensing challenges. There's insurance to consider. And so we've had a lot of our alums who are finding that it's just easier to, rent facilitation space and then kind of leave the administration to the healing center. So I think it's a question of how much you would, if you're really thinking about doing a lot of it and maybe you want to bring in other practitioners, and it would probably make sense to get your space licensed. And so that's a great example of the kind of thing that in the intensives we talk more about, in practicum, certainly in consultation, that there's a lot of, sort of advice about how to set that up.
Yeah, and Josh's question about 3 colleagues wanting to get trained at the same time. Yeah, they're welcome to apply. Yeah, and it would be great if there's other folks in the program that you could move through with.
Did you see Rachel's question about affinity spaces during the program, Syre?
Yeah, I did not, but yes.
140 that Rachel
Right.
asked.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yes, like as we get applicants into the program, you know, that again can definitely be something that we assess interest in, right? So as we are assessing interest in who you might like to work with for your mentor, we can also ask if there's interest in affinity spaces. So not only is the many folks, so the lead education team, we are all BIPOC. Also, many of us are queer or trans. I'm a trans man, right? So there's opportunities for different affinity spaces. So that's something that we can also ask. And if we have enough interest, then I believe we can make that happen as well.
Krishina, I'm not sure if I'm saying your name. Maybe you could help me learn your name.
Hi, it's Christina.
Christina, yes. Thank you so much. Could you ask your question?
Yeah, so I have a couple actually. First of all, kind of like piggybacking off of the question you just answered about facility. I'm curious about like if you have an idea of how many like facilities exist in Colorado now. I know that it's quite expensive to do that.
To start a healing center, you mean?
Yes.
I think there's about 50 at this point.
Wow, that's more than I was expecting, actually. I'm also curious about if there are maybe like is a way, or if like it's something that is being considered as far as maybe facilitating for hospice, maybe like in home, and if that's something that might happen in the future. And what
it's
that might
allowed
look
now.
like. Okay.
It's allowed now, yes, it is. That the board, the Colorado board, there were some people who that's really their passion is palliative care and end of life, and they really lobbied hard to make it possible that there is a law that if a client is homebound, and that would include many people at the end of life, that it really would be challenging for them to leave their home, that you can, as a facilitator, work with people in their homes. There's, certain policies around that. You need to have access. If you're not a medical provider, then there needs to be access to a medical provider within like a certain number of minutes. There's some additional steps that have to be done. There needs to be 2 people there, so there's some other provisions. But yes, for palliative care, you can work with people at home. There still needs to be some connection to a healing center, because as a facilitator, once you're licensed, you can also get this other license called a handler's license, which means that you can handle the medicine. But, sort of like, where would you put it? You can't just have it at your home, right? And so if you're someone who's really interested in palliative care, you would probably still have a connection to a healing center. That's where your medicine would be kept. There's kind of paperwork to be done. But yes, that is allowed.
Thank you so much. Just had one more question. I guess I'm still like kind of figuring out like my path, and I mean, I love that you have mentioned several times that you don't have to decide right away. I am potentially interested in maybe pursuing research in the future, and I'm curious about like what mentorship looks like as it relates to that.
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with the research landscape. I know Bruce and Marcela, two of the co-founders, have been really active in research with MAPS. And so, yeah, I'm not sure if they offer like mentorship or consultation specifically related to research. Sara, do you know more about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's like we have a few studies that we're participating in. We're definitely connected in different research networks. I'd say that many people I know who are really involved in research that those who have worked as facilitators, even if they're not actively doing a lot of facilitation, has been so helpful for them to then go on and do the research. Or another way of saying that is sometimes when people are engaged in research, but they have never sat with people in facilitation, it's sort of like it's too theoretical. They don't really know what it's like. And so I think being interested in research, even if you're sort of unsure about, I'm not sure exactly how much facilitation work, really working clinically or, really being in the facilitation space I want to do, but I want to know what that is. I want to get that experience. And then when I go on to be working more in the research space, there's just a much deeper understanding. Many of us have also worked on clinical trial teams, doing facilitation. And so, there isn't necessarily like a clear path of like, do this program and then here's a study to join up with, but just to say in our bigger extended networks, there is a lot of research happening. There's 3 studies that Memoru is a part of right now that we're able to kind of, invite our clients to go into, and they're compensated for that. And, on the topic of end of life that you were bringing up, we're collaborating with UCSF right now. They have a big palliative care psilocybin team, and we're working with some members of their team to see how we can translate their findings of psilocybin for palliative care and clinical trials into community settings. And so we're working with them on this manual and wanting to kind of, start supporting people on the ground wanting to do that work, so that there's more of a bridge of sort of like what's happening at the clinical trial level and then what's happening at the community level might be kind of different. So, yeah, those are.
Thank you so much.
Yes, absolutely.
I just wanted to answer Justina's question. Do Colorado Healing Centers require the facilitator has completed 150 hours, or do they have to have also completed the license? So yes, as a facilitator, you need to complete the 150 hours, and then you get and then you also need to complete the 40-hour practicum, and then you would be able to get a training license. And then at that time, you can start working and charging money for your services as you're pursuing the 40 additional hours of consultation. But the consultation happens while you're working. So yes, you have to, so you'll have a training license until you are complete with your 40 hours of consultation, and then you will get the full licensure. And yeah, we have time for one more question.
Maybe Maha, if you'd like to come on and ask your question.
Yes. Hi, Sara. Hi, Syre. Thank you for your time. I know, Sara, you mentioned, I just wanted to double check. I'm not a trained clinician, and that's what's been holding me back from applying to, programs like this, especially, programs that they have a BIPOC focus. So I just wanted to double check. My first question is, if I don't have that background, can I still apply for the program and be considered? And then if you can also talk briefly about the scholarship and how does that work? How much of the tuition, is that covered by scholarship? I would appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And yes, it is true. You do not need to be a clinician to apply for and be admitted into the program. And so, yeah, and then how the scholarships work, as a part of your application process, there are essay questions that you'll respond to that talk about how you want to use this work, what your particular circumstances are as it relates to requesting scholarship support. And then, yeah, most scholarships are partial tuition scholarships, right? And so, we will be making those awards on a rolling basis as people apply. And so yeah, I think like a quarter to half scholarships are most of the support that is possible. Yes. So, did I get all the questions answered?
You did. Thank you so much.
Okay. You're so welcome. Yeah.
Maybe I could just quickly, before we answer Jaya Devi's question, this is great, everything you're asking. People are doing different things. So Jaya Devi is asking, if you're already a clinician, can you use sort of like typical therapy billing and insurance and so forth for part of your sessions? Some people are doing this. Some people are counting prep and integration as a regular therapy session. They're using their normal sort of like EMR and, and then just the facilitation is done separately. Other people feel, that they want to keep it separate, or they have doubts about, like, this is where insurance kind of starts to come in. People have different insurance, they have different risks. Some people are working without insurance and they have waivers. They might work with an attorney and have waivers that they use. I can say at Memoru, we have our psychotherapy done separately, and that's a separate business. And then we have our everything with psilocybin, we have in a state nonprofit. And so for us, with our accounting, our insurance, we, I think, are way on the kind of like conservative, the most kind of legally legal side of things. And so we keep it separate. And there's so much nuance to this, so I'm just giving you like a little snippet. There's so much nuance, and we would talk about it more in the program, especially in the intensives. We would get into some of this, but then we have plenty of our people in consultation where they don't have insurance, they're clinicians, and they're doing their normal thing, like with insurance for prep and integration. And so it's really sort of a personal decision. It's kind of a business decision. It's also a risk decision, how much risk you want to take with your insurance. Some insurance companies, they won't really come out and say whether they're going to cover psilocybin. They're like a little vague about it. They'll say, if it's in your scope of practice, we cover it. Well, what does that mean? And some people feel, I've done this training, I'm licensed. Yes, I can show this is within my scope of practice. There are some psychedelic specific insurance companies that will say you're insured for psilocybin. And so, it's still a really emerging landscape. And so a lot of these questions is sort of like, here's what people are doing, here's their approaches, because it is such a kind of early frontier. It is a little challenging to say, this is exactly what's legal, this is exactly what you can do, and this is exactly what you can't do. But just to say, this is just a tiny snippet, and we will share everything that we know about the landscape with you in the program. But yes, there are people who are integrating it into their existing practice. So we should probably end because we're a little bit over. Like Jacob said, you can send us an email at info@memoru.com, and also check out our website for more questions. And I just feel so excited to know that probably some of our next cohort may even be here in the room. So I'm just so enlivened by that. Syre, I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining. Really excited to receive your applications and maybe spend some time together this coming year. So take great care.
Thanks all.